Hi everyone, I'm Mark and welcome to my kitchen and welcome to my 6L80 automatic transmission rebuild. I am currently getting it ready for air testing off of the pump, which is going to fail, and it's going to fail pretty miserably. After I did the initial rebuild, I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what I had done wrong, and it turns out that it was essentially nothing. I needed some more knowledge regarding brand new Teflon seals, and I needed to track down a factory defect that has existed since this transmission was made. Much of what I did while trying to diagnose these issues, I actually had not seen online in any videos. And as a first-timer, that would have been very useful. And so here we are. I would like to thank Highland Transmission of Ossining for helping out with that Teflon seal concern. And I would especially like to thank Nick's Transmissions here on YouTube, who, when I posted a question to a forum, responded very quickly, not just with information, but also by creating a YouTube video specific to my questions, which was awesome. So I am ready to get started. And for that, I've got a cheat sheet. I have two of them, actually. I have one cheat sheet that I made, which covers the testing of the ports off of the pump, and then I have a second sheet which covers the testing once everything is back in the case. Let's get started. We've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is going to have one of our concerns. You should be able to pretty clearly hear that there is a bleed. And each time I cover the compensator feed port, the tone changes, so it's pretty easy to isolate it to that circuit. Otherwise, it holds pressure, and it's pretty good. 3.5R holds pressure, also has a bleed, but that bleed is a pinhole that's in the drum and is supposed to be there. Finally, we have the 4.5.6. As you can see, that engages, but we're losing pressure. And so those are the problems that I need to figure out. And so to do that, I want to break down the transmission into its separate pieces and test them independently. It is possible for me to test the 4.5.6 assembly, and that is done through this entry. One port I cover, one port I apply air, and that will test the pistons and the clutch engagement within the 4.5.6. I am also able to test, separate from the pump, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5R drum, and that one does not have a shaft. The shaft is the stator, so to be able to test this guy, it is necessary for me to use a tool which seals it and provides 4 ports to test the 4 separate circuits that terminate in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5R. Then the pump itself has obviously the individual ports that I'm able to test, and they travel through the pump cover, then into the stator support, through the stator support into either the 1, 2, 3, 4 or the 4.5.6. As it's reasonably straightforward to test the drums, I'm going to get started there. So we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 port. And we have no leak or cross bleed between the 1, 2, 3, 4 and either of the compensator feed circuits. So that issue does not exist in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5I drum. 3.5R is going to leak, but it has that pinhole. And so if we cover that pinhole, we have no bleeds. And it retains beautiful pressure. And we can also check compensator feeds 1, which is beautiful, and 2, which is beautiful. Everything within the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5R drum is retaining pressure. That doesn't confirm the seal between the scarf cut rings on the stator support and the interior surface of the drum, but everything within the drum itself is good. So now we have the 456. And that also holds pressure. That does not successfully confirm that the Teflon rings, Teflon seals, are making a good seal, isolating the 456 circuit from either bleeding out above or below when it gets slid inside of the stator support. But the 456 and the shaft have no problems. And so that leaves us with the stator support, which has its ports on it. The easier one to test is the interior port for the 456, as I'm able to reach in there and cover it. And we have no leak. So that means that the seal between the pump cover and the stator support is good, and that within the stator support's shaft we've got no problems. Unfortunately, the 1, 2, 3, 4 comes out of an inset oval shaped hole that I am unable to cover with my finger. And so the solution was an earplug, which press down, slide in, and it will expand into the hole. It is not necessarily a perfect seal, and I cannot hold 50 psi with my finger, but it makes progress. And then get that covered with electrical tape, which will not hold to the stator support, but once it starts touching itself, it will adhere. And after I've got some contact, then I pull that nice and tight. And at 50 psi, that's going to blow out. So we're now at about 10 psi. And while it comes out that port, the sound change is still occurring. This isolates the problem to being somewhere between the pump cover and the stator support, most likely to do with the connection between the stator and the support itself with that paper seal. It eliminates the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 5 R drum from being in the mix on that one. And it also eliminates the scarf cut seals on the exterior of the stator support. With the 1, 2, 3, 4, since the next step is going to be taking the pump apart, I'd rather focus on the 4, 5, 6 first. With the 4, 5, 6, we've already eliminated the shaft, the drum, the stator support, the scarf cut seals, and our focus is on the Teflon seals and how well they are creating a seal within the interior of the stator support. I've actually replaced these seals twice. The first time I used the plastic bottle with a pipe clamp with the electrical tape wrapped on the interior to resize the Teflon seals. The second time I used a professional product called the Ring Buddy, which comes with a expander and a resizer. When I used the Ring Buddy to replace the Teflon seals last time, I actually took a video of that, so I'm going to show that to you right now. Now the expander does not actually slide all the way down to the point that the Teflon seal drops into the slot. Unfortunately, what they said is that the material was thin enough that they were breaking, and so the current model, version 2, expands, but then you work it down. And so I'm working it up and down a few times, and then it's probably still going to be a little bit too small, but let's see what we've got. Nope, that dropped in pretty nicely. So I basically want to expand it the barest minimum necessary to get them in their individual channels. There we go. First one in. There's no force. Move in. They have a high chance of reforming. Correct size. There we go. Before I get started resizing the Teflon seals, I actually want to try to get an idea of what the goal is. So I have a bore gauge, which is appropriate for the inside of the stator support, and I have my digital calipers. And so hopefully I'm able to figure out essentially what's too big, what's too small, and maybe even what's just right. I'm going to get started by measuring the inside diameter of the final mating surface for those Teflon seals. And this would be the smallest size the seals should ever get. And if anything, they should be certainly a little bit larger than that to ensure good contact. .3. And we certainly don't have the level of precision here, but it's a very good range. Next, I'm able to compare that 35 just by feel against the ring buddy. And that's a tight fit there, but once in, it seems like it is almost identical. So I'm certainly comfortable that the ring buddy resizes to the size of the stator support. The only question is, could it actually resize a hair too small? The other thing that I noticed is that the bushing is a beautiful guide to the pre-existing beveled edge inside of the stator support. So long as that Teflon seal can fit past that bushing, it should be guided into the stator support's final position, almost identical to the way the ring buddy works. The bevel is a little bit smoother on the ring buddy, and I think the ring buddy's starts off a hair larger. But by and large, so long as, let's get this measurement, the Teflon ring is smaller than 37.5, but larger than that 35 1/3, the stator support itself is able to act as the final resizer. Theory on installation is great, but coming back to what really matters is whether or not these specific Teflon seals are the cause of our 456 leak, or whether they are the correct size. Measuring them is a little bit difficult because you have to maintain their round shape while squeezing on them. 35.64. I'll measure each one independently as a cross check. .7. 35.73. These numbers are beautiful. These Teflon seals are the correct size, and they have no damage. These Teflon seals should not be the cause of the 456 bleed. But back to theory for a moment. It is interesting to see what the numbers are. And so we have a brand new factory sealed Teflon seal available. And if we place it over the expander, that will hold it in a circular shape. I can squeeze 35.75. And let's see what the expander 39.43. This also allows us to confirm that the Teflon seal will immediately, when expanded, continue to be, I wouldn't call it deformed, but change size, 36.96. So it is necessary to resize one way or the other. But for practical purposes, our Teflon seals are great. The issue was unfortunately a lack of knowledge. What I did not know is that additional transmission fluid needs to be added to the port such that it gets pushed in and behind the Teflon seals, which then allows that pressure to push the seals against the inside of the stator support properly. Without that fluid in there, the air can just pass right through and you have loss of pressure. The other item that I heard is that the seals that have miles on them get burned in and do not have the same problem. I don't have enough knowledge about that, but a guess that I have is that they might be so impregnated with fluid that they're able to make that seal happen either way. If you were to actually take them out, clean everything very thoroughly, they may no longer make that perfect seal. Either way, we are going to move forward with another test and add transmission fluid. But first, verifying status quo. And we have a loss of pressure. And we have no loss of pressure. The problem was solved that easily. Annoying, but I'm very happy that that one is taken care of. The other one is the 1, 2, 3, 4. The 1, 2, 3, 4 is quite the exciting one. So let's get this apart, ready to go again. As a reminder, we already tested that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 5R is in good shape. It has no leak. We confirmed that the scarf cut seals are not involved due to the fact that the cross leak between 1, 2, 3, 4 and the compensator feed circuits occurs between the pump cover and essentially the inside of the stator. I want to be able to evaluate the stator separate from the pump cover, but to remove the stator from the pump cover, I have to remove the pump cover from the bell housing. And so I'll remove all of the bolts from both the stator and the pump cover, starting with the stator so it still won't move around in the process. Now it's possible to confirm that the circuits coming into the pump cover do not interface through to the bell housing in any way. If I apply air, I can both visually inspect and apply air, and the air is still trying to exit only in the stator support. And so we're now looking at separating the stator support from the pump cover. And for that, I do not have the right tools. While I have an arbor press, the inconsistent surface of the pump cover means that I can't lay it flat on that arbor press. And so it's going to be a mallet. You will also notice that the gasket that I have in place is not the original paper gasket, but is one that has a silicone seal running along the edges in parallel to where there will be metal on metal contact. And the purpose for that was one of the other attempts to try to isolate the leak, or essentially remove the leak and prove that it had been the contact point here. It was not the problem, and I don't like how the silicone is able to peel off so easily, and so I am going to revert to the normal GM original equipment style gasket. The other thing I will do is attach the pump cover to the bell housing with a couple screws. This is not to permanently secure it, but just to hold it in place for the moment. Once I go to the install here, I'll take these off and put on the press. I am now ready to independently test the pump cover from the stator support. My first step is to find which circuits on the pump cover correspond to 1, 2, 3, 4 and the compensator feed lines, which are these two parallel channels right here. And then also finding those same channels within the stator support. I can do so by momentarily reinserting the stator support, holding my finger on, in this case, the compensator feed circuit, which will be this channel. And since they're parallel, it's these two, and they are mirror images of each other. The 1, 2, 3, 4 circuit has 2 holes which lead into the shaft. Compensator feed has 1, but on the shaft side, where I've used the magic of video editing to have reinforced the electrical tape before getting started, the compensator feed bleeds out of this lower, very difficult to cover opening. And so it will be far easier to apply pressure to the 1, 2, 3, 4, which is already covered, and see whether or not it will bleed out of the compensator feed line. The solution that I came up with for the 2-hole, 1 air nozzle problem was to use rubber plugs. One plug is solid, and the other has a hole drilled through the middle of it. To confirm that the solid plug generates an airtight seal, also confirms that any airflow through the plug with a hole is through the hole itself. And so I will insert the plug with a hole and listen for airflow. That airflow might either be through the other 1, 2, 3, 4 hole, or it could be the compensator feed. It may be too quiet for you to hear, so I will narrate as necessary. And we have airflow. And we have no airflow, confirming that there is no cross leak between 1, 2, 3, 4 and the compensator feed within the stator. With the stator support itself good, the next thing that I'm going to check is the mating surface between the stator support and the pump cover. The goal is for that to be closer than 1/1000th of an inch in precision. And so I have a machinist straight edge. Mine is accurate within 1/2 of a 1,000th of an inch. And I have a feeler gauge that is accurate to 0.8 thousandths of an inch. And so my goal is to see if there's any point in which the feeler gauge is able to slide under the straight edge. At no point did the feeler gauge snag or fit underneath the straight edge, and so the pump cover stator support seemed to be within spec, and that the paper gasket, which is going to get installed between the two, should take care of any minute inconsistencies. That is where I went next, and I went there 2 times. I actually replaced the gasket in 2 instances. The first was with the normal factory gasket, and the second was with the gasket that included the silicone seals. Following both of those replacements, the bleed between the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the compensator feed circuit still existed, which was highly confusing as everything had been tested and the pump cover is 2 board ports straight into the circuits, and a visual inspection, I was unable to see any problems there. However, a problem still existed. It seemed pointless, but I decided that I would vacuum test the pump cover since I had the equipment available anyway. A couple small modifications, which was to replace the bleed port that limited the vacuum to 25 inches of mercury with a plug, replaced the tip with the one that would fit into the inlet ports, and on the Sonic's vacuum test block, I flipped the silicone such that even if one of the holes rested over a circuit, air would not flow through. And we're able to achieve a 27.5 inches of mercury vacuum. And when I cover the port, we're getting 28.25 or so. This is with the compensator feed port open, and there is no change whatsoever if I cover it or not. These steps eliminated the pump cover as a possible cause. Problem being that eliminated everything. So while spinning my wheels, I decided at some point that I would come back and I would pressure test the pump cover rather than vacuum test the pump cover. Process is almost identical. Cover both the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the compensator feed. Put a plug into compensator feed that I'm able to put in and take out. Cover as best as I can. And it's probably a waste of time. Instantaneously, I am able to blow out the plug from the compensator feed port. There is a leak between 1, 2, 3, 4 compensator feed somewhere in the pump cover, which I'm able to isolate slightly more. If I plug both ports, I can separate the 2 bored holes coming from the face of the pump cover from the vertical channels I have a blatant leak crossing between the 1, 2, 3, 4 compensator feed inside the bores. This seems ludicrous. It seems that it should not be feasible. There is no rationality behind a leak inside the bores. And yet it's there. And knowing that it's there allows me to focus more precisely on that bore, more so than I ever would have considered doing so previously. If I backlight that bore, that will allow me to get a much better view inside. And there, on the left-hand side, there is that dark spot. And then if I move the backlight to the compensation feed port and look around inside, we can see like patterns on the bottom. There is a factory original defect in the casting of this part where there is a fracture line fissure that the two bores each intersected, which allows air to pass between them, sufficient to fail that air test. What are the chances? So tell me, what are the chances of this? Have you ever seen this before? Have you seen something like this before? Is this, how rare is this type of problem? Because it stumped me for a very long time.